I know, Helen, that you have been, you took part last year in the Parliamentary Inquiry on reality television here in the UK. And I'd just be really interested to hear you connect up some of that experience to how you sort of see these things that are going on in terms of the way that reality TV is bleeding into other roles and interactions with the media. Because I think that it'd be quite interesting to know how your experience there was in terms of interacting with politicians who are trying to think about the role of reality television. Pardon me.
Yeah, so I think the fact that there was a parliamentary inquiry into reality television was a shock to some of the MPs sat around the table who'd never watched any of it. And then it was quite interesting because I think once you start to watch it, you do get an insight into Trump, because you do get an insight into his performative politics. So the argument about Trump is that what he does is perform the idea that he's an ordinary man, even though he's clearly elite and privileged and has all of these other access to all these other kind of resources. And what reality TV has been doing for 20 years now has been calling on people to perform themselves as extraordinary or ordinary. And we've kind of got used to that, and we don't think that it's unusual. And so in that space where we've seen a real change in media, where you wouldn't see people, you would not necessarily see people on television. It's quite likely you will have seen somebody you may be connected to on television. And now we have social media where we all see each other. So reality TV was the start of this, what people think of as the democratization of media. We all get a place in the show now. We're all our own show. And the problem with that is when that happened, for producers making the programs, it was happening without any oversight over who these people were, what kinds of things you could ask them to do, how you could set them up, what kind of rights they had to their own performance. So one of the problems at the moment is that reality TV stars don't own their own performance rights. They sign them all away. Whereas if you were an actor and you had an agent, that wouldn't happen. So this space opened up for people to be media people without any regulatory oversight. And what we saw, particularly in the UK, although there are lots of other examples, we've seen horrible places of exploitation, people being abused backstage, even people being plugged with substances so that they perform in a particular way. So this brokering of this new performing world has happened without much oversight. And now, now there's kind of more clamping down on it. The broadcasting code is going to change to try and encourage people to look after performers better, although they're not called performers. And there's some discussion about whether or not they should have labour protections and work protections, which is happening in France and in some parts of Australia as well. So there's this, in terms of thinking about cultural studies as now, this thing just sort of blew up, and it took 20 years for people to get control of it. And I think Trump becomes the kind of emblem of what can happen without this having any kind of without there being any kind of oversight about where this is going. Because, of course, reality TV bleeds into our political landscape. Our understanding of performing our own sense of rights is something that reality television has encouraged. And now that's what Trump trades on. So in a way, some people would say reality television prepared the ground for a group of people to think that that kind of performance is legitimate and acceptable. And the other thing that's argued is that reality TV has created an environment in which we all accept the idea that we're going to be watched 24/7, and that that's acceptable as well, that it's grown up with surveillance culture. So it's a kind of, for me, reality television is an intersecting set of different kind of political, social, economic and technological forces. So what I was doing in Parliament was saying, we need to think about what's happened here, and we need to have responsibilities for certain kinds of people who don't have other people to speak for them, who don't have agents, etc. And we had some success in that area. Don't know if that quite answers your question, Alison, but I was trying to tie all those things. If you want to listen to reality TV, there's a podcast at the moment on BBC Sounds. It's a 5-part documentary called Watching Us, which I'm also speaking in, so you can hear more about that there.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds really interesting. And it does, I think, I mean, I didn't have a real specific question, but that was really interesting in terms of hearing you think through those connections, because I think certainly that issue around reality TV and the people who are on it not having representation, we also see in other parts of the media. So I listened to a really interesting podcast series on the podcast Working, which is an American podcast, but they were talking about influencers and also around how the emergence of agents for influencers is partly in response to the fact that there was that period when they were also without representation, and having to negotiate contracts themselves, having to think about like what is exploitation when I'm dealing directly with a marketing, the marketing team of a company and those kinds of things. So I think we're seeing it in a lot of spaces, and it's really
because the idea of a media career, it has blown up. There's all different kinds of media careers that you might have now that are not directed through a formal training route, and they're not directed through a kind of institution or a structure. And these things have evolved, and influencers have a big problem with breaking, in the UK anyway, with breaking the advertising standards regulations, and then they can get big fines because they don't know. But that if they would belong to an organisation, so this is why they're now trying to organise themselves. So it's an interesting moment. Yeah.